projects, focusing over the last 10 years or so entirely on net zero infrastructure, on systems like carbon capture and clean hydrogen. So if you've got any questions today around the environmental aspects of what we're doing and the land issues that may affect you, then please do come to me.
I'm Susan Mackenzie. I'm Spirit Energy's project manager for the Morecambe Net Zero project. Now, the Morecambe Net Zero project is in the most part the offshore section of the project for the carbon store, but we do have a handover point from peak cluster onshore.
Great, thank you. And James?
Yeah, good morning. James Glass. I'm the onshore pipeline engineer. My background, I'm a chartered civil engineer with about 12 years of high pressure pipeline design, delivery and construction. Thank you.
Fabulous, thank you very much. Right, so let's start right at the beginning. Why are we here? Why do we need peak clusters? So, peak cluster has two objectives. So the first of these is to help protect and preserve British industry. Many of you will be familiar with the deindustrialisation of the British landscape. So we've lost a lot of our steel plants, our oil refineries, our chemical plants, our fertiliser plants. Cement and lime are critical to our society. Cement is used in everything we do, from building schools to railways to hospitals, and lime is used across our society as well for cleaning drinking water, putting in toothpaste, a whole raft of different use cases. But those industries are under threat. Those industries have seen a significant downturn in their production over the last 3 decades, an increase in imports, and what this project will allow us to do is invest in UK manufacturing capacity and help mitigate some of that erosion of UK manufacturing capability. And in parallel with doing that, we are tackling climate change at a very large scale, because in producing cement and lime, we produce a significant amount of carbon dioxide as well. And that carbon dioxide comes from what we call process emissions. So most industrial carbon dioxide emissions in the UK today come from combustion. So we burn fuels, usually fossil fuels, to heat something to make a product. When you make cement and lime, the carbon dioxide gets driven off by the chemical process of making that product. So there is no alternative solution to decarbonising those industries other than carbon capture and storage. Now, I recognise that's a reasonably controversial statement. Happy to unpack that a little bit more on questions and answers, but that is essentially why we are having to capture the carbon dioxide after it has been emitted. And the scale of this project is substantial. So we will capture and lock away in perpetuity over geological timescales about 3 million tonnes of carbon dioxide a year. Quite difficult to get your head around that, but every individual in the UK emits on average about 5 or 6 million tonnes a year. So if we took the entire population of the Wirral, doubled it, it's essentially the same as all of those emissions. So from your gas boilers, from your road transport, from your buses, from your schools, from your hospitals, all of that amount of carbon dioxide doubled is the same as what we're going to do in this one project. So it's a material scale for the UK. So, Peak Cluster Limited, we are a newly formed company which was formed last year. We raised some investment to undertake the development of the pipeline for what we call the full chain project. I'll explain that more on the next slide. But the pipeline essentially goes from cement and lime plants in the Peak District, so Derbyshire and Staffordshire. They are where they are because that is where the limestone is. That is the feedstock for the engineering process, which makes the materials. And then, as you can see on the map, we're taking that carbon dioxide, compressed, purified, through a high-pressure steel pipeline, all the way from where it's produced to the coast being here on the Wirral, where we'll further compress the carbon dioxide, we'll take that offshore, and then we'll store it in perpetuity in the depleted gas reservoirs in Morecambe Bay. So the company is made up of the 4 cement and lime companies who are involved in the project. They've all invested in the project. Alongside that, there is an international investor called Summit Energy Evolution Limited, owned by Sumitomo, a Japanese conglomerate. But about half of the investment has come from the UK's National Wealth Fund. That is a wholly owned, a government-owned bank which invests in low-carbon infrastructure and regional infrastructure. So one of the key things which will come out quite a lot in this presentation is that we are at an early stage in this process. We did early stage feasibility work over the last couple of years, but in terms of the detailed engineering and the consenting, we're about 9 months into a 3-year process. So we can put out the broad parameters of the project, but a lot of the technical detail we don't currently have. So when we're answering questions, this is not obfuscation in any sort of way. This is very much giving you everything we can at this point. We've still got a long way to go in the engineering and consenting journey. So this is what a carbon capture and storage project looks like. So over on the left-hand side, we have some industrial facilities which currently emit carbon dioxide up chimneys, and vast amounts of it too. So about 75% of all the carbon dioxide in the Peak District National Park comes up one chimney, and that is the Hope Cement Works, many of you are familiar with. What we will do is capture that carbon dioxide to prevent it going into the atmosphere. That is how we mitigate climate change, preventing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. We capture it from what we call that flue gas in a chemical process, which is well understood and well tried. We purify it up to about 95% plus carbon dioxide, compress it, and then put it in the onshore pipeline, which runs for about 200 kilometres through Derbyshire, Staffordshire, East Cheshire, West Cheshire, and onto the Wirral. We then compress further, as close to the coast as we can, and that gives us sufficient pressure to then take that carbon dioxide offshore. We go through a series of offshore pipelines to an offshore injection facility, where we then inject that carbon dioxide deep underneath the seabed to a depleted gas reservoir. Now that depleted gas reservoir is currently producing natural gas, has done for the last few decades. It will very soon be empty. When it ceases production, we will repurpose it as a store. We're putting carbon dioxide back in where natural gas has been taken out. That natural gas has been there for tens of millions of years, stored safely. Our carbon dioxide will be stored in perpetuity in the same place. So that's an overview. I'm going to hand over to Chris now to talk a little bit more about the route and why we chose the Wirral.
Fantastic, thank you, Dave. So, as we've been developing this project, I've now had the opportunity to speak to probably hundreds of people along our route around the industrial sites in Derbyshire and Staffordshire, all the way through to the end of the Wirral here. And one of the most common questions that we get is, why have you picked this route? Because even when people fully understand the need to protect our industry, invest, and protect our environment in which we live, they want to know why the infrastructure that we need has to go in the location that we're proposing, because that's the reason it affects you in particular. So, I'll talk you through the process that we are going through to help us choose the most appropriate route for that pipeline and the infrastructure that goes alongside it. This process started a couple of years ago as we were looking at different options, and that includes options that were not a pipeline. So looking at things like, is it possible to move the industry? Is it possible to move CO2 by road or by rail instead? And having looked at all of that wide range of options, we come back to the most efficient and least disruptive option available to us is a pipeline that connects those sites in and around the Peak District all the way to offshore storage. Really only is the only viable way of doing it. So we must then select a pipeline route, and that includes looking at all of the possible constraints, the things that might affect the routing of that pipeline, both onshore and offshore as well, because we have to have the two and they have to connect. So one of the most important decisions we had to take is a landfall location. Where do you connect the offshore and the onshore systems? So I've got a map up on the screen behind me that shows our coastline. And when we started undertaking this work, we looked at all the possible locations that you can see along that coast as to where might be the most appropriate place to have a landfall, to link those systems together. And that means looking all the way from North Wales all the way up to Cumbria. Now, it's a very developed coastline, so there are actually very few places along there where it's possible to connect those pipeline systems and have infrastructure that you need to be able to link them together. Looking at the south end of that, at the North Wales coast, It's actually a reasonably similar situation to the one we have here in terms of routing, similar kinds of constraints, but the pipeline both onshore and offshore is quite a bit longer, and that means more construction, more disruption, and overall greater environmental impact by doing so. It'll also involve going through an area that's designated as an area of outstanding natural beauty, one of our national landscapes on that North Wales coast. That's fact. It's an area of outstanding natural beauty that's been designated.
But there isn't.
So we also have the Wirral. Clearly an area you are most interested in. So there's a lot of the Wirral, in fact, almost all the undeveloped area is designated as Greenbelt, but as is most of Cheshire as well. The purpose of Greenbelt is to prevent urban sprawl, is to prevent encroachment of urban development and maintain open space. Now, a buried pipeline is what's known as compatible development with Greenbelt because it doesn't affect the overall urban sprawl. In fact, it protects that because you cannot then build houses over the top of that pipeline once it's in place. So, we also have some above ground infrastructure that's required as part of the pipeline. That's clearly really important in terms of effect on Greenbelt. So we have to look at the most sensible siting and locations and sizing for all of that, which Susan will speak about in a moment. I've had quite a lot of questions from people about why we can't go around the Wirral, either up the Mersey or the Dee. Both of those estuaries are highly protected for biodiversity. They benefit from the highest level of protection. They're extreme. Excuse me, we will take questions at the end, so if you want to save those for a little bit later, we'll be pleased to answer them all. So, it's not possible to put the pipeline up either the Mersey or the Dee. It would be extremely challenging in terms of construction. And those sites, as I say, benefit from the very highest levels of biodiversity protection. So for those people who are interested in the protection of our natural environment in the audience, we have ruled those out for that very reason. We do have those same sites at the end of the Wirral as well, but by choosing the route we avoid going through as much of that as possible. So we only hit it when we actually reach the coast. If we went down either of those estuaries, we'd be putting pipeline and extremely large construction operations through around 20 to 25 kilometres of those designated sites. So it's really not a reasonable approach. Going further up the coast, again, becomes extremely challenging because you can see you've got that highly urbanised corridor between Liverpool and Manchester, a lot of built infrastructure, and finding a route through that, once you look at all the different constraints that are in place, just becomes impossible. One of the mentioned Greenbelt on the Wirral. I know that's very important to people. People have also raised the presence of sites of special scientific interest on the Wirral as well. We have routed to avoid those wherever possible. There's only one of those which is within our scoping boundary that you may have seen on the plans outside. There is the potential for us to clip that in our construction, but we'll be looking at construction methods that avoid any impact to it in order to protect that site of special scientific interest.
What do you mean by that?
We will come back to questions at the end, so if we can save those for a little bit later, that would be really helpful.
Seriously, let's have the speakers and then have the questions. Honestly, you'll have plenty of time for the questions, but it slows things down if there's a lot of heckling, please.
There's no heckling. It's just a question.
Exactly.
Which one?
Okay, just going to wait until we've got some quiet so that the people who want to listen can do so.
Yeah, well, you need to listen as well. You need to listen. Yeah, we've got voices. You've got the mic, we've got voices.
You will have the microphone shortly. I promise to get as many questions in, but you're slowing things up by contributing, let's put it like that. Please, let's hear the speakers.
Make sure we don't understand. You're talking apples.
Okay. We will be taking questions at the end.
Why at the end? Why not individual?
Because we won't get through all of the information that we want to talk to you about. So if you just hold it, we will get to questions at the end. So if you listen to the speakers first, then we'll come back to your questions. Thank you. Okay. So further, what we've done in terms of developing the proposed route, I've put on the plan behind there, the route as it stands, affecting this area in particular. You can see the 300-metre corridor within which we expect to be able to find a viable pipeline route, and you can also see the areas at the end of the Wirral within which we are searching for a location to put above ground infrastructure, and we'll come back to that particular topic in more detail in a moment. So we are going through our consultation process. We've had our phase 1 consultation. We've had a lot of feedback, thousands of pieces of feedback from people along all of that pipeline route. That's been extremely helpful. We are making changes to that route, looking at the detail of what's been given to us and what's that new information that's come in, and we will be able to come back to you later on during the project development phase to tell you more about that. And I'll give some more detail on that later phase of consultation a bit later on here. But in terms of the goals of that, we are looking to take that 300-metre wide corridor on the basis of further information that we gather, things like existing utilities, environmental surveys and so on. We'll be able to narrow that down to a 100-metre corridor to give people much more certainty on where we propose to go. And then we'll also be able to give more detail on the kind of construction methods that we are likely to use in any one place. When it comes to building the pipeline itself, we will only need roughly 30 to 40 metres of that 100 metres. The reason for doing that is that it allows us in that final phase of detailed design, and when we are on the ground doing construction, to do further work to avoid local environmental features, maybe important trees and so on. Within that width, we can carry out construction methods that reduce the impact on those even further. When we come back out later for that phase of consultation, as well as giving you further details of the route, we'll have much more detail around those construction methods, things like construction compounds, lay-down areas, and where we'll be looking to have access to our working area so that we can manage site traffic, which I know will be a concern for people around disruption during construction as well. So we'll be able to give you much more detail once that work is complete, looking at all of those studies. Okay. Thank you. I'll hand over now to Susan to talk a little bit more about the coastal PGR.
So I've got 2 slides to present, and I know these have already been shown before, and a lot of all the information you've heard before. So what I want to do is start off by coming back to the point that Dave made, that we are very early in the design, and most importantly, we're working through how much compression we're going to need before it goes offshore. So the amount of compression that we need is really going to influence the size of the facilities and its location. So the map here shows 2 areas of search, but we will only need 1 installation, so it won't be in both these areas of search. And even if we have our biggest area of the AGI, it will still only take up a very small part of the areas of search shown on this map. We know that there are lots of constraints across those areas, and that is why we're showing such large areas. Safety is our highest priority, and that's the main constraint. We're doing a lot of detailed modelling of what would happen in the event that there's either deliberate venting for maintenance or accidental release of CO2 to ensure that we are a safe distance away from properties.
You are affected as a risk. You say you
Please let us wait for the presentations and then we'll have the questions. You are just slowing things up by intervening at this stage. Please, let's just...
Well, she's very important point.
So we know that there are also flooding risks, and we're doing quite a lot of work on ground conditions as well, so that we can design facilities and understand where it can go. So this next slide is a graphical representation of the information that has been provided textually before. Because we don't know how much compression that we'll need, we show the worst case here. That is what we've included in the scoping report that was issued put out in January. So the slide shows an indicative layout with the largest amount of compression that we might need. And the compression is the three large greyish boxes at the top left.
I'm sorry, you're going on about compression, you don't know how much you're going to need. Well, surely you should know. If I let, we've got to know.
I'm sorry, sir, if I let you ask that question, the whole procedure, you will have plenty of opportunity, I promise you. But the sooner we get the presentations done, we can get to you.
So we're very early in the engineering phase at the moment, and we're also showing a stack here of 50 metres. But again, that is the absolute worst case scenario, and we don't want it to be any higher than is necessary for safe venting. And we're doing more modelling to understand if and how we can safely bring that height right down. You can see here that there will be trees around and planting around the site.
That makes it all right.
Not so bad
So
then,
the
is it?
trees are very important to minimise the visibility of the site and to help with noise attenuation. Yeah. So when we come back at the next phase of consultation,
Don't bother.
we will have a lot more information to provide to you on the precise design and the location. I think it's back to...
Thanks, Susan. Okay, so I'm going to pick up and talk a little bit more about the pipeline construction. So we have two sections of pipeline. So the main section of pipeline which comes along to the coastal AGI is going to be just 200 kilometres, as we talked about. Pipeline will vary to a depth of 1.2 metres, which is standard for all UK high-pressure pipelines. The pipeline in that section will be up to 36 inches in diameter, again, which is pretty standard for pipelines.